They told me the files had been destroyed, that what happened in Kolyma 12 was sealed forever, frozen with the bodies in the vault. But I was there, and no matter how much they erase, I remember everything. My name is Dr. Anton Mirov. Back in 1983, I was a junior neurobiologist, part of a classified Soviet project known as Operatsiya Sneg, or Operation Snow. Publicly, it didn't exist. Privately, it was the USSR's attempt to master cryogenic stasis, to create a system where a human could sleep for decades and wake up unchanged. We weren't trying to reach the future. We were trying to survive the present. The Cold War was boiling. There were whispers that the Americans were building bunkers, time vaults. Moscow wanted something better. So they built Kolyma 12, a frozen research facility buried deep beneath Siberian permafrost. No name. No coordinates on record, just us, 42 scientists, engineers, and 6 volunteers. Prisoners, all sentenced to death, offered a second chance in exchange for silence. The tests started small, cryo chambers powered by liquid nitrogen, monitored by early neural feedback devices. The first subjects lasted 12 hours. Then 36, then 72. It was working, until it wasn't. The fourth subject, Alexei Voronov, entered the chamber at 19 hours on February 12th. Vitals steady, neural activity stable. We initiated phase 2, deep freeze. Everything was routine until the 48th hour. We noticed spikes in the brain, not death spasms, not errors, activity. Voronov was dreaming, more than that, conscious. He was aware, and worse, he was communicating. Not out loud, through the EEG, patterns, pulses, words. At first they were random, then they formed sentences. And the first sentence was, "I see you." We thought it was some kind of echo, residual neurons, but it kept going. "I'm not alone here. There's something in the dark. It's learning." We tried to wake him. Manual override failed. We cut power. The chamber stayed cold. We disconnected the system. The signal continued. He was no longer just dreaming. He was somewhere else. And then the final transmission came through. 5 words, etched into the EEG printout like a signature. "You shouldn't have opened this." The chamber shattered, not from pressure, from inside. And what crawled out, it wasn't Voronov anymore, at least not completely. I still remember the sound. It wasn't glass shattering. It wasn't an alarm. It was a breath. Heavy. Slow. Like something waking up from a dream it hadn't finished. When the cryo chamber ruptured, steam flooded the room. The lights flickered. The emergency sirens failed to activate, fried from the inside as if the circuitry had been reversed. Melted and frozen at the same time. Alexei Voronov stepped out, naked, barefoot. But his body was ice cold, literally, radiating sub-zero temperature from his skin. The frost didn't melt around him, it followed him. We rushed to sedate him, to restrain him, but he didn't resist. He just looked at me. And in that moment, I knew it wasn't Alexei anymore. His eyes were wrong, not blank, not blind. They were filled with movement, like 1,000 thoughts spinning beneath the surface all at once. He spoke, not in Russian, not in any human language, but we understood it anyway. The guards dropped their weapons. One of the doctors collapsed, sobbing uncontrollably. Another ran straight into the wall, broke his neck instantly. I just stood there, frozen. Then Alexei turned to the observation glass and placed his hand on it. The ice around him spiraled, outward, like it was growing, feeding on something invisible. And then the EEG monitors came back online, on their own. They showed not 1, but 2 brainwaves inside his body. One was human, the other was something else. Its pattern didn't fit any biological structure we knew. Too precise, too clean, almost like it wasn't a brain, but code. The lead neurologist, Dr. Tatarin, whispered, "He didn't just dream, he made contact." That was the last thing he ever said, because Alexei spoke again. And this time we could all understand him. He said, "Where I went, there are no names, but there is hunger." The next 24 hours were chaos. Moscow sent orders. Quarantine the site, destroy all research, terminate the subject, but when they tried to sedate him again, the liquid froze inside the needle before it reached his vein. Every camera in the facility began recording again, even the broken ones, but the footage didn't show Alexei. It showed us moving, talking, working, but it wasn't what we were doing. It was what we hadn't done yet. Recordings of the future, footage of people that hadn't arrived yet, scientists we'd never met. A version of the facility, cleaner, more modern. Alexei was showing us what comes next, or maybe what had already happened, because that was the horror none of us could process. Time didn't follow him out of that chamber. It followed whatever came back in with him, and then we noticed the frost, spreading through the walls, into the vents across the ground, but it wasn't ice anymore, it was crystal, lattices forming symbols, runes, mathematical sequences that matched no Soviet encryption protocol, but Alexei traced them with his fingers, over and over, smiling after. 72 hours Alexei stopped speaking, not out of silence, but because he no longer had to. We heard him anyway, in our thoughts, in the static of the monitors, even in the sound of our own breathing. He would sit in the corner of the chamber, not restrained, not contained, just waiting, watching the frost continue to grow. The symbols had formed complete circles now, spirals, equations, something resembling a map. But when we tried to document it, the symbols would shift. What we recorded on camera wasn't what was physically on the wall. Every photograph showed something different, sometimes coordinates, sometimes diagrams of unknown anatomy. Once, a perfect image of my wife. She had died 5 years earlier. The base's lead physicist, Dr. Raskova, attempted to isolate Alexei's brainwave patterns again, but the readings didn't come from him. They came from everywhere. The floor, the lights, the ventilation system, like the base itself, had begun to resonate. Then we saw her day 4, a woman in a lab coat, walking down corridor 3. No ID badge, no name on record. She walked slowly, barefoot, soaked in condensation. We thought she was a hallucination, until 2 guards tried to confront her and collapsed before touching her. Autopsy revealed no heart, rhythm, only a faint vibration inside their lungs, as if something had taken root there. And the woman, gone. No trace, except the mark she left on the walls, a perfect, burned-in spiral. That's when Dr. Raskova said the words, "I'll never forget." We're not just studying it anymore, we're inside of it. The cryosleep experiment was never just about time suspension. Not really. It was about crossing a threshold. The brain, in cryogenic stillness, enters a state where time, space, and thought decouple. And something else can slip in. Something. That doesn't need flesh or language or light. Something that's always been waiting for someone to open the door wide enough. Alexei was the first, but now he wasn't alone. We began seeing them, figures, not always human. Sometimes tall, like silhouettes stretched by firelight, sometimes small, crawling on the walls, whispering with no mouths. The base went into full lockdown, no contact with the surface. Generators began failing, and then Alexei stood up. He walked to the central lab, calm, barefoot, his skin now cracking like ice, glowing faintly from within. He looked at each of us, one by one, and said, "You brought the cold in thinking it would preserve life, but cold is not stillness, cold is hunger." We tried to shoot him. I watched one of the guards fire 3 rounds point blank. They didn't bounce, they just stopped, like the air refused to allow it. Alexei looked at the bullet mid-air and said, "This is the last time violence will make sense here." Then the lights went out, and the screaming started. We lost 3 people that night, not to violence, not to infection, but to themselves. They locked themselves in their rooms, and when we finally forced our way in, we didn't find bodies. We found their uniforms, folded neatly, their boots clean, and a mirror. Every one of them left a mirror behind, facing the wall, with fingerprints, thousands of them, pressed from the inside. Alexei stopped moving. His Body froze mid-step, literally solid, but he was still there. You could feel his presence in the walls, the light, the temperature. And then something impossible happened. At 03:17 in the morning, Alexei walked into the lab again. Same uniform, same scar under the eye, but his body was still frozen in the main hallway. 2 Alexeis. No reaction, no confrontation, no explanation. The new one simply walked to the reactor room and spoke to the walls. We listened through the observation mics. He whispered, "I am awake, but they are not. Help me remember what they were before the frost." The lights flickered. The walls began to sweat. Condensation ran upward. And then we started seeing others, not just Alexei. Copies of people who were still alive in the base, walking past each other, sometimes standing shoulder to shoulder in the hallways, staring at one another without blinking. No aggression, just observation. We ran facial recognition on the cameras. It confirmed what we feared. There were 53 people in the base. We had only 42 on record. Unknowns, all of them exact genetic matches to someone already on the roster. The duplicates didn't speak. They just wandered, always barefoot, always cold. Dr. Raskova tried to question one of them. She asked, "What are you?" It answered in her own voice. "I'm the part of you that never slept." That was the last time I saw her. Later we found her in cryo chamber 7, lying inside. The lid sealed shut, but the chamber was offline, and inside the glass she was smiling, even though her body was frozen solid. Her eyes were moving, looking around, tracking us. We realized then the cryosleep didn't just preserve the mind. It copied it, fragmented it, and made it accessible. The base had become a reflection pool for consciousness, and something on the other side had learned to swim. Now, every mirror, every puddle, every reflection carried the risk of contact. Some started hearing whispers in the glass. Others saw themselves blink out of rhythm. Some looked away and came back to a face they didn't recognize, even though it was theirs. And one of the engineers, Petrov, took a scalpel and carved into the wall. "We are not individual, we are memory repeated." Then he vanished. The cameras show him walking into the cold room, but never leaving. Yet sometimes I hear him outside my door, breathing and saying my name. But it's not his voice anymore. I started writing notes on my arms, not because I was losing memory, but because the base had begun rewriting the logs. Each time I checked the computer terminal for the crew manifest, my name would be there. Twice. One entry as Anton Mirov, active, and another, Anton Mirov, deceased. I thought it was a glitch, until I checked the internal archive system. There, buried under security clearance Alpha 0, was a report. Classified. Stamped. With a date that made my stomach turn, January 4th, 2003. 20 years in the future, and yet it opened like any file. Post-mortem analysis, subject Mirov, Anton V. Cryo, incident survivor. Status, mentally unstable. Containment advised. Final. Entry of Project Operacja Snig. I scrolled down. There were pictures of me older, thinner, pale eyes completely white. It claimed I had been recovered from the ruins of Kolyma 12 alone, still alive in Cryo Chamber 1, the same chamber we had sealed 10 days ago, the same one. I never entered. According to the report, everyone else was dead. Some burned, some frozen in motion, some with multiple versions of themselves, fused together in the walls, half merged, half screaming. But the worst part, the document ended with, quote, "Not from me, but from me," a transcription from when I was found. "You brought it here, but it never needed your permission, it just needed your mind to stop fighting." And that was signed, Anton Mirov, Alpha Echo. I don't know what Alpha Echo means, but now I think I've seen him. 3 times this week I've woken up to find my bed untouched, like I never slept in it. My boots clean, my logs rewritten, and this morning I found a note. Handwritten, in my handwriting, but I didn't write it. It said, "Let me take over. You're tired. I don't know how long I've been here anymore. Time doesn't work right. I hear the old alarms going off even when the power is down. The hallway lights flicker in patterns that form words in Morse code. I checked. Sometimes they say we are still inside. Sometimes it's warmer on the other side, but last night they said, "You are the last to realize you're not you." And now I understand the frost. It wasn't to preserve, it was to layer, to trap identity, to make us readable. A medium for something else to build its own version of us. We thought cryosleep was about survival, but it was a broadcast system, and our minds were the antenna. Now I'm alone. Or maybe I'm not. Maybe I never was. Maybe I'm already the echo, or worse. Maybe he still thinks I'm the copy, and he's just waiting for me to fall asleep. I tried to escape today, not just the base, but myself. I packed only what I could carry. Rations, analog maps, a flare gun, and a physical printout of the recovery report. The one from 2003, the one that says I'm dead. I didn't trust the door logs anymore, or the clocks. Or the cameras. Time here doesn't move forward. It curls. When I walked past the medical wing, I saw myself, not a hallucination, not a reflection, me, standing over a table, taking notes, focused, methodical. He looked up. We locked eyes, and we both froze. He didn't attack. He didn't speak. He just watched me, like he was trying to decide whether he was looking at his past or his future. I turned and ran. I don't know which one of us was the original. I don't think it matters anymore. The hallways shifted while I ran. Yes, shifted. The floor bent beneath me like rubber. Walls stretched outward, forming angles that couldn't exist. One door led to 5 others. The stairwell I climbed became the corridor I had just left. The base isn't fixed in geometry anymore. It rearranges based on who's observing it, like it's reacting to me, or testing which version of me should survive. After hours, or minutes, I can't tell anymore, I found the comms room. The manual transmitter still worked, barely. I tuned it to a frequency we used during initial startup, and I sent out a signal. This is Dr. Anton Mirov. Column 12 is compromised. Do not respond. Do not retrieve. Do not enter. I am not stable. I am not alone. A few seconds later, the response came. But it wasn't from outside. It was on a loop, my own voice. From earlier today, saying, Colima 12 is compromised. Do not he. Respond. Do not retrieve. Do not enter. I am not stable. I am not alone. Word for word. Then the static changed pitch. It wasn't noise anymore. It was breathing, and then came the second voice. Not mine. Deeper. Calm. Layered with distortion. Like something trying to copy my tone and getting it too perfect. It said, "You are the last door, open willingly, and we become." I shut the equipment off, but I could still hear it, not through the speakers. In the walls, in my own chest, the frost has returned. But this time it's moving upward, not outward, from my boots to my legs to my spine. I still have control, I think, but the numbness is spreading, and every time I blink I feel something behind my eyes, watching from the inside. Tonight I found a hatch I didn't remember, a maintenance shaft with no label. It led down, deeper than any blueprint suggests the base goes. I stood at the edge for nearly an hour. It's dark and cold, but I swear, I heard heartbeat down there, not one dozen's, like a cluster of sleeping minds, pulsing in rhythm, and one of them whispered, with my voice, "You're already down here." I don't know how long I can hold on, but I know what's waiting at the end of that shaft, the truth, the real one. The last thing Alexei saw before he stopped being Alexei, and I have to go down, because if I don't, something else will come. Up instead, I went down the shaft. I told myself I wouldn't, that I'd wait it out, that I'd stay strong, but the silence above was worse than the whispers below. So I climbed down, rung after rung, metal frozen against my hands, breath fogging upward into nothing. No wind, no echo, just stillness. So perfect it felt artificial. The shaft opened into a circular chamber I had never seen in any schematic, and in the center, a chamber, just like Alexei's, but larger, wider, open. It was empty, but the floor around it was covered in mirrors, hundreds, no, thousands. lined up perfectly, leaning inward toward the cryo-bed like worshippers in prayer. I looked into one. It showed me, but younger, smiling, wearing a coat I'd never owned. Then it blinked and smiled. Wider. The mirrors began to shimmer, not reflect, but shimmer, as if they weren't surfaces but windows, and from each one a version of me looked back. All different, all familiar, some angry, some tired, one crying, and they all whispered the same thing. "You've already made the choice, now become the reason." I turned away and came face to face with the original Alexei, or something wearing his shape. He looked peaceful. He held out his hand and said, "You came down to find truth, but truth doesn't exist here, only function. We are vessels, you were the last." I shook my head, told him I wasn't like him, told him I still remembered who I was. He tilted his head like a parent indulging a child. Then he stepped aside. Behind him, I saw the cryo chamber again, now glowing, now open. Inside it, me already, lying down, eyes closed, smiling, hooked to wires that pulsed gently with light. I turned to run, but the hallway behind me was gone, just white, endless, weightless, silent. And then I heard my voice from every direction. This was never about surviving. This was about passing it on. I looked down. Frost had overtaken my chest, my arms, my face. I didn't feel cold. I felt still. I felt right. And just before everything faded, I whispered one final log entry. Dr. Anton Mirov, final transmission, Project Sneg, complete. The system is online. We are all awake now. And then the mirrors shattered, all at once, and nothing remained, only the hum, the frozen hum of something that remembers us, better than we remember ourselves. End of Colima 12. Terminated System Echo, online.